Hello everyone, my name is Jim Garrity and I myself are about to celebrate our 27th wedding anniversary. In a bubble of loving emotion I decided to make her a copper rose, and the type of rose that I decided to make her I haven't made before, and it's taken a little bit longer than I thought it was going to. Yesterday we made and textured the petals and the leaves, and today we need to add the veins to the leaves, and that's going to be the first job. Right, it's time to bring this procrastination to an end. There's still lots to do, and I'm not sure if we're going to finish this rose before the big day arrives. I've now textured the two leaves the same as I did the petals for the rose, and now using a marker I've put on where I want the veins to go on here. Now I'm going to be marking the veins with a cold chisel. Now this is a cold chisel that's been used on brick, so it's blunt at the end, it's not very sharp. And I've also got a piece of wood in the vise now. I've taken the metal plate out because what I want to happen is as I hammer where the veins are going to go, I want the wood to give way so this thing keeps the crease in the copper. So if I put the cold chisel here and then hit it, and then we go up a little, and then up, and I'm keeping the line or the new piece that I'm marking in line with the last piece. And now the sideways. Now with this one I'm going to kink it in slightly at an angle, so if I come around here I can show you. If I hold it that way I'm doing it more in the centre than I am on the outside. Excuse me. And the same with this, more in the centre than the outside. Use fingers. Now you can see on the rear the shapes of the veins. We just want to flatten the leaf out a little. So it looks like that, and I'll do the same to the other one. Both leaves now have their veins hammered into the surface, and you can see that putting a piece of wood here has allowed the copper to give way and really mark the position of those veins. The next thing we need to do is clean this up a little. Now it may need a little bit more flattening or possibly curving. We'll decide on that once we get it next to the rose. But the next thing we need to do is try and get rid of this red ink and also some of the oxide that's formed on the surface. Now I've got a piece of wire wool here, and if I start to rub the surface of the leaf and then push it into the vein with the edge of my thumb, then that should start to clean the copper and also remove the red ink as well. If it doesn't remove all the red ink, then we could use some form of degreaser, perhaps methylated spirits to bring it off, or some paint thinner, something like that. Some roses, they have what looks like little barbs running down the edge of their leaves on both sides, and I think that looks quite attractive, so I'm going to do that and file in the barbs. We're using this small file. It's a small Swiss file, it's a half round. I'm putting the flat edge down and then filing in that direction to produce the barbs. So, oops. It does take a little time, but I think it's worth it. You can see in these images the results of all that filing. Now the leaves are finished, we need a stem. Now I need a short length of copper wire to connect the leaf to the stem of the rose. Now there's copper wire inside this. This is Twin and Earth house wiring. Now if you've got a piece of this, the easy way of getting that copper wire out is by holding it with a big pair of pliers, or stick it in a vise like this. So I've poured the the two other wires apart, and I'm just putting the bare copper wire in the vise, and now pull just like that, and then that gives me a nice length of clean copper wire, just like that. We're now on the bench, and I have slightly shaped the leaves pointing outwards. I had a look on the internet to see what rose leaves actually look like, and they seem to bow from the bottom outwards, so they bow across here and then down to that way. Now I want to hold these onto the stem with a piece of copper wire, and remember I pulled a piece of copper wire out of some house wiring earlier on, and that's what's here. Now I'm going to attach this wire to the back of the leaf just here. Now to do that I want as much area there as I can get, so what I'm going to do first, I'm going to cut it off very square like that, and now using these round nose pliers I'm going to turn it all the way around, then come back on itself. So let's turn this round like a shepherd's crook, and then we'll close it so it's a full loop like that. Squash that so it's nice and square and flat, and there we go. So we have a nice loop, and that will get soldered onto the rear of this leaf like that, which will make a nice wide pad. Before you solder, everything's got to be very clean. Now the bottom of this leaf, what I'm going to do is just go over with a little bit of emery cloth here, and that will remove all the oxide and the muck that's formed there since we've been bashing it with a hammer and bending it. So that is nice and clean there. A little bit of a hole there I can't get into. Let's just scratch it off. Now I want to put a dollop of solder on here. Now I'm actually going to solder it with a soldering iron. Now it's a 50 watt soldering iron with a big bit on the end, and because it's a soldering iron, it won't give a load of heat into here, so I'll be able to put a dollop on here and it won't flood up the surface because there's not that much heat in the iron. And before I do that, I just need to put some flux on the surface, and that will stop the oxidization. So the flux is just there, and let's also put flux on the piece of wire that we're going to be connecting to it, and then just hold that down like that. Now I need solder, and I keep the solder in this, it's an old film cartridge actually. You can see the flux is burning off, the leaf is heating up, and the solder is melting, and there's a dollop on there. I'm also going to tin this side of the copper wire, or this end of the copper wire, like that. And now if I hold the wire on top of the leaf and press down like this, the heat should go through the wire into the leaf and melt everything like that. Take the iron away. This wire is getting warm now, so let's turn it over, and it's not laying as flat as I want it to, so I'm going to a little bit of solder on the soldering iron. Did you hear it go click? That was when it's now flat like that, and we'll check it now, and that's a lot better. So there we have this solder around the edge I'll be able to clear up, so that gives us our leaf on a stem. This is what that joint looks like close up. You can see the soldering iron makes a good job. So the leaves are now complete on their stems. The flower is next. We've got to put the flower on its own stem. Now that stem, I'm going to be using a piece of 3mm copper pipe. Now I bought this pipe with a load of other different sizes from a show that I went to, and I thought, now they look very useful. Brought them home and I found another use for the 3mm pipe. So that means that all the parts that make up the flower, all the petals and also the bud cover here, they've all got to be drilled 3mm so they can fit on that pipe. There is a 3mm drill bit in the bench drill. Just turn the bench drill on and then we can start to drill. All the petals and that bud leaf at the bottom have been centre dotted, so I should be able to find the centres quite easily. And that's all the pieces drilled. All the parts now have their holes and they're all ready to get pushed onto the stem. There's one thing we need to do before we assemble the rose, and that is to anneal all the pieces of copper. Because they've all been texturized now and hammered, the copper's gone hard again. Once we get the rose together, we're going to need to maneuver those petals around and bend them to the right shape. And if they're hard, that's going to be quite difficult to do. However, if we anneal them all now, it's going to be soft and far easier to do. All the petals and this piece that represents the bud have now been heated up, they've been cooled and they've been cleaned. And again, it's amazing how soft they feel. Now, I didn't have any water in the workshop, at least not in a bucket, so I put them all onto the back of the vise to cool down. So they're nice and soft. Next thing I need to do is fit them onto the stem. Now I don't want this long stem, so I'm going to cut it off about there. I'm making this up as I go along. I've never made one of these roses before, so let's see what size it is. It's going to be about 200mm long, which is about 8 inches in imperial speak. So snip it off and we will take off the sharp edges like that. So I've now cleaned this wire as well, so we have a clean portion just here. There was flux on it. I've taken the flux off because I forgot that I needed to do this bit first, and this is the clean end, so I'm going to wrap the clean piece of copper pipe, the clean piece of wire around the copper pipe. 2, 3, and then I'm going to come back on top of what we've just wrapped just to make it a little bit larger. Push it together and now snip it off. So that goes just there and there. Now there's 2 sharp pieces sticking out. We need to just bring them together so they don't jab in anyone's finger, like that. So everything, all the copper around there has now been cleaned with a little bit of emery cloth, and hopefully it will solder nicely. We're going to put some flux on like that. I'm going to solder this with the iron. It's a 50-watt iron, so we should be okay for that. And let's bring this up, little vise, and we will hold the stem of the rose in the vise. And now grab the solder, tin the iron or tin the bit like that, and let's do some warming. This will take a few seconds to warm up. And then with that flux on, the solder should run nicely all around the wires in the pipe, which it has done. And that makes a nice stop for the flower to bump against. This is what that stop looks like in close-up. We're looking down onto the top first, and now we're looking up at the bottom. And I'll clean all that flux off before I assemble the rows. That's now the step soldered onto the stem. We can put the bud leaves on first, remembering that the textured side's got to be on the top. And now we put on our petals. They're all round about the same size, so we're going to go 2, 4, 6, 8, because 5 is quite a lot, 6 is a whole load of. Let's go for it. Let's see how many. Let's see what it looks like with the 6 petals in. Now, to stop these coming off, I'm going to just cut the top of this off, and then down to about there, like that. And then I'm going to hold this in the vise and just tap on the top here to rivet it down and hold everything in position. Let's go and do that now. It's just holding the stem, which it is there, and now that stop hopefully will bump against the soft jaws and won't go down any further. Now, it's going to have petals folded up around it, so we're not going to see that part. Right, so that is now been squashed on top, which holds it all together. These still turn, but they're quite tight, which is good. So now what I need to do is start bending these up and shaping. So this is a close-up of how the flower looks before we form it all. We've got to twist around the petals, so we have 2 and then 2, 2 and then 2. And I think we may be able to do that as we go down through. Bring these up and form it, get to the next one, and then twist it each time. I think that's what we're going to do. So let's start. We need to lift this petal up, and this one as well. Now we want to also bend them around into rose petal shape. Like this. So what you need to do is get that first one really quite tight so this one can come around it. Now also what you want to do is on the edge of the petal is just bring them out a little like this, so they bend out. Now it should be fairly easy to do if the metal's just been annealed, which this has, and we'll also do the same to this inner petal here. Time is getting on. I've left this a little late. Anne is coming back from work in 1 hour. I'm not sure if I'm going to finish this. If not, then I'll have to do it tomorrow morning, because tomorrow is our 27th wedding anniversary. Gosh. Okay, let's scrunch that together again. Like that. Is that looking like the centre of a rose? Right, so that one curled up this way, so the next layer needs to be 90 degrees around. There we go. Yes, which is there. So we now pull up this layer here. That comes up like that, and we start twisting the petals. I've got to be careful down the bottom here. I think perhaps the pattern would have been better if the petals were narrower at the root down here, because at the moment they will stop the next layer coming up and we're going to run out of petals. So perhaps it wasn't such a good idea putting all 6 of those double petals on. Let's bend the edges over. Do you know, I'm wondering whether I should be cutting this, because I can't get the bottom of the petal close enough together, and that's going to stop this one folding up. Let me just get a pair of cutters. We're going to do some modifications, I think, some running mods. And yes, we have had a bit of success. Using the normal tin snips, I could push these in and cut them. So what I've done is, if you imagine that, well, that is a petal, the shape of a petal. Where these red lines are, that's where I've cut the petal on here. Now what I intend to do is fold the petal up, and it's going to fold across here at the bottom of those red lines, and then that piece that's left, I'm going to fold that up as well. So that means that this will be folded up, that will be folded up. These pieces of copper will then be out of the way for the next petal to fold up. So I'm hoping that that is going to work. Right, I have cut the corners off down here. It was just on these first 2. I think the rest are going to be okay. That's not looking too bad. It looks a bit like a rose, and I think it will. Well, it have to do, because it's almost 5:05 now, and Anne comes in at 20 past, and I've still got to get the leaves on, and I will have to do that, I think, tomorrow morning. So it's going to be an early start tomorrow. Right, let's put this away so she can't see it if she happens to come in a few minutes early. I ran out of time yesterday. It's now the 6th, and it's our wedding anniversary day. I'm up early. The time is 20 past 5, and I need to get this finished before I go back into the house. Now, what we're doing is attaching the 2 leaves to the rose, and I need to drill a hole, or 2 holes actually, in the stem here to take the stem of the leaves. Now, I'm going to centre dot just here, just there. So one goes there. Now just a little bit out. I'll turn that round, and now I'm going to drill this with a hand drill. I want to go in at 90 degrees to the surface to start off with, and then I'll turn the drill over slightly so I can get in at an angle. So I'm going through the outside wall, and I'm going to start drilling, bring the drill over as we go in. So I need this hole going in at an angle, but I also don't want to snap the drill off, so I've got to be careful. So the drill's got a good purchase now. And we are through. Now that drill it's actually a 1.3mm drill. Ooh. Now the stem on this leaf is too long at the moment, but I just need to get the end in, and that goes in. Excellent. So that's the first one drilled. Let's spin this around 90 degrees and we'll do the next one. The second hole drilled. Just check to see if the stem of the leaf will fit inside it, which it does. That's good. Now I'm going to solder these stems in the stem. So I'm going to solder the stem of the leaf in the stem of the flower. So that'll be the next thing to do. I just turn the soldering iron on. I've cut the stems of the leaves so they're a little bit shorter and poked them in the holes, and that is what it looks like, so it's not too bad. Right, so the next thing I want to do is put flux in both the holes. I'm going to clean up the bottom of the stems of the leaves, flux in the holes, flux on the wires, put them together and then solder them. There will be some solder left on the stem of the rose, but what I can do is scrape that off with a blade later on, and then take that back with a little bit of emery cloth. But we'll be doing that later on. So next thing is to solder the stems of the leaves into the stems of the rose. Right, it's time to start soldering. Let's grab my flux in the curry paste bottle. I'll put the stem of the leaf in there, and that drip of flux I will just get into the hole there. So we've got flux in the hole, got flux on the stem of the leaf, so we push the leaf in like that, so that's gone in, and I'll leave the leaf around about at that angle. Now the other hole underneath is further up, so I'm going to put the iron just under here, which should warm it up, and then I'll be able to solder. Now I've got to get a fair bit of heat into this tube before the solder melts. Just wipe this side of the solder, make sure that's clean as well, which it is. Tin the bit. Right, and now that's warming up. The solder probably flowing onto the stem, but that's good because I need a good thermal connection. I'll just dab the solder, and I can actually see the solder running in, and there we go. I saw the solder run into that joint, so I know that that's good, and it looks, you can see the meniscus of the solder around here where it's running in, which is great. Just want that to cool down a little more. Use my fingers. Just to cool that down, and that is set. Right, there's the first leaf. Let's see how much solder is stuck on the stem. Not too bad. We'll clean that up in a moment. Right, now we've got to put the top leaf on, so let's hold this in the vise and stem in the flux, drip the flux into the hole just like that, and in with the leaf. Here we go. Right. And that's frozen in place, so that is dry. Let's take it out. And we've got a little bit of solder to clear up now, so we'll just do that, and then we can bend these flowers we can bend these leaves to suit. Well, in essence that's finished, but let me just clean this stem up first. That'll be the last job. And here we are, nice and close to the stem, and you can see the solder that I need to take off. So the way I'm going to do this, There's a lump of solder just there. That's the last part that left the iron, or where the iron left. And now I can scrape, or actually cut, the solder away. The solder is a lot softer than the copper. You've still got to be careful though, because the blade will cut into the surface of the copper if you're not careful. Right, I will carry on with that and finish this clearing up. Woohoo, look at that! 20 past 7 and I've managed to finish the rose off complete. I've got the engraving on the back and it's all ready to give my darling wife in the house. Well, it became a little bit tight at the end, but I managed to finish the rose on time and present it to my wife on our special day. She was very pleased with it. Could you do something like this? Of course you can. And with that, this video is at an end. Take care everyone, and I'll see you next time. Could you do something like this? Of course you can.